So in the last session, we talked about securing the communication between Docker client and daemon using TLS certificates, right? So today we will talk about Docker volumes. Okay, so before understanding Docker volumes, let's see. So a simple example. So where we try to create a file inside a Docker container and see whether that file exists. Okay. So we already seen this example in Docker container session, right? So we try to install a Figlet package into a container, right? And then when we try to, delete the container and recreate it, so we found that that package is missing. Correct.
Yes,
Okay. So what is the reason for that? Because container will not store your data, right? Okay, if you take this simple example, so here what I'm trying to do is, okay, so let me run and show you. So here I'm trying to create a container. Okay, so the name of the container, let's say I'll say it as test. I'll automatically remove once I exit it. I'll start this container based on Ubuntu. Okay, so what is the default command that your Ubuntu will run? It's
bash.
bash, right? Okay, so I'm going to execute the same thing. Okay, I'm going to override it basically. Okay, so whatever I give after the image, so it will override CMD. Okay, so can I also override entry point?
Yes,
Okay, so always remember you can also override entry point. Okay, so here I'm just replacing that bash with this complete thing. So here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to echo hello into a file called hello.txt. So within the container, remember I'm running this, it will get executed within the container. And also I'm just trying to, uh, just read that file. And since this is a one-time operation, the container will be stopped as soon as this command is executed. So I want it to auto delete. So I just give -rm. Okay. You can see here, since we have Ubuntu image, so it immediately created a container and then it created that file hello.txt and then it read that content. Okay. Since we have used -rm, you won't find that container again. So now what I'll do is I'll try to create the same type of container from the same image. Okay. So this time I won't create the file. I'll try to just read it, cat hello.txt. Okay. If you see that hello.txt file is missing. So the reason why it is missing is, so whatever the file that we created in the previous command, okay, so that content is only restricted to that container. Once that container is deleted, whatever data that you have inside the container is also deleted. You will not have any backup. Okay. But let's say you're running a web server like Nginx or any other application. Okay. Or you have some important configuration inside the container. Okay. How do you take the backup of that particular file or a folder? Because whatever changes that are made into the container are not persistent, right? Right, guys?
right,
Okay. So in many cases, you would be interested in storing the logs or taking the backup of the logs for further analysis. It can be for anything. Okay. Now, how do we, take backup? So in order to understand that, we need to understand this, how a container is created. Okay. How container stores its data. Okay. So we know that a Docker image is a read-only template. So when you create a image, it becomes read-only template. It becomes immutable. Okay. So a running container cannot change anything in the image. So what container will do is, so container will have a writable layer on top of this read-only layer. Okay. So if I have to show this image, it will be like this. Okay, we know that our image will be full of layers. Okay, so we have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, up to n number of layers. Okay, all these are from the image and these are read-only layers. On top of read-only layer, there will be read-write layer, also known as writable layer. Okay, so this is where container is going to store the data. Okay, and you won't find all these layers. Okay, so all these layers will appear as a single file system. Okay, that's the reason why it is called union file system. You will not see the differences or different layers like read only layer or read write layer inside the image. Okay, or the container. It is all unified. Okay, so in case if I have to change something, so let's say in the image I have a file, let's say etc hostname. Okay, so by default this file, let's say it is set to test. Okay, but when you create a container, so we get a unique ID, right? Correct? Some alphanumeric ID, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually the host name. It has to be stored under this. But how will a container edit this file when this file is read only? Okay, so what will happen is this file will be copied to the writable layer and then that file will be modified in the writable layer. Okay. Now what is advantage is if this container gets killed or destroyed, so whatever changes that you do to this layer will be destroyed. Okay, so which means nothing is impacting your image. That's the reason why we call it as immutable. Now, so if I have to take backup of a container, what should I, which layer I should take as a backup? I should take the complete read write layer, right? Correct? Got
Right.
it, guys?
Yeah.
Okay,
Got it.
but you won't see the differences between read write or read only layer. It is all unified. Okay, so when we talk about taking a backup, either it is a file or it is a folder. So nothing related to writable or read only layers. It's not like that. Okay. Well, let's see how to, you know, take those backups. Okay. Before that, so whatever we discussed, like in case if container needs to change something, it first copies that file to the writable layer, right? So this method or this mechanism is also known as copy on write. So when container needs something to be changed, first it will copy from the read layer to the read write layer, and then it will modify there. That's the reason why it is called copying the file on writing it. Okay, clear, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So as we know that anything that we write to the writable layer is temporary. Okay. So in case if you want to persist those changes, you need to take backup, and that's the reason why we use Docker volumes. Okay. In Kubernetes, we have separate concept. There we have Kubernetes persistent volumes, Kubernetes volumes. Okay. So Docker volumes are much simpler. So there are two types of volumes. So this is really important. Okay. So volume means it is just a directory, right? So it is not a new concept. Okay. So Docker support two types of volumes. So one is named volume or also known as Docker volume. So this is very specific to Docker. Okay, so you can call it as a Docker volume. Okay, it is it is named. Okay, when you talk about Docker volume, it is named. The other one is bind volume. Okay, so let's talk about Docker volumes which are native to Docker. Okay, now let me just show a simple example. Okay, so here, if I take an Nginx container, okay, just forget about named volumes or bind volumes. I have a container. So inside the container, so I have this location user share nginx HTML. So inside this folder, there is a file called index.html. So this is the default HTML file that my nginx web server is going to serve. Okay, clear? Or let's assume, nginx is storing the logs under var logs nginx. Got it? So I want these logs to be stored or backed up. Okay. So what should I do? I have to take the backup, right? Of that particular volume inside the container. Correct. Right, guys?
Right.
You guys able to hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So which means I can take that volume and then I can just copy into my host machine. Okay. Like this. Okay. But copying means every time, I have to use some command like that. Okay. So it is not possible. That's the reason why we go for volumes. Okay. So what we do in volumes is we create a volume first and then we will mount it just like an external storage. It is just like you created a storage like EBS volume and then you mount it into your EC2 instance. Got it? Okay. So first is named volume. Okay. So it can be created using the command known as docker volume create. Okay. So before that, let me show you the documentation as well. Okay. So you can just go to docker volumes. Okay. So this is the official documentation. So if you follow this, it is sufficient. Okay. Everything which we are going to see, it is already there. Okay. So the command is docker volume create. So docker volume. So let me do ls, sorry, help. Okay. So you can create a volume using docker volume create,
You are
delete
creating on
it.
the host, right?
Sorry.
You are creating on the host.
Yeah, I'm creating on the host, Docker host. Okay. So list all the volumes using ls. Prune means it will delete all the unused local volumes. Inspect to get more information. Okay. So let me just take this create command, docker volume create hyphen help. Okay. So here we have a driver. Okay. So what is this driver is it is just like way to create this volume. Okay. So by default, it is local to your system. The volume will be created locally. Okay. And then labeling the volume is not necessary. Hyphen or opt is not necessary. We can simply go ahead and create docker volume create name of the volume. So the name of the volume should be unique. Okay. Since I will be using this volume probably to store nginx data, so I'll call it as nginx underscore backup. Okay. So this creates a volume or a folder on this machine. Okay. It is nothing related to containers. Okay. Or anything like that. We have not mapped this volume to any container. It will just create a volume on my machine. But where exactly this volume will be created? Any idea?
On the host.
But where?
Probably where
So being an user on a Linux machine, if I have to create something, where will I create?
root file system. Create a phone directory.
Root file system. In my home directory. Okay. But what is the home directory for all the Docker operations?
Okay. War live.
Varlib Docker. Okay. So this volume will be created under varlib Docker. Under varlib Docker, there is this volumes inside this volumes, you will have your own folder, Nginx backup. Okay. Inside Nginx backup, there is a common folder called underscore data. Okay. This one. So this is where
क्या हुआ?
whatever you push inside this Nginx backup, you can see it here. Okay. Got it, guys? But how do I know this exact location? Let's say if I don't have any idea. So you need to use inspect. Okay. So we have created a volume. In order to list all the volumes, I can just do docker volume ls. Okay, there is this volume, Nginx backup. Then I'll do docker volume inspect. So name of the volume is Nginx underscore backup. Okay. Now you can see what is the name of the volume. Nginx backup, the driver is local, created at this timestamp, mount point. So var lib docker volumes, the name of the volume under volumes and underscore data. So depending upon which name you use to name the volume, this will change. Got it? Clear, guys?
So different servers, different backup folders we create.
I mean, you can create any number of volumes and then use them for various containers. This path remains the same. Okay. So under the volumes, every volume will have its own path, subpath directory. Okay. Let's say if I create, let's say Docker volume create, I'll just say that, uh, let's say a volume for Nginx logs. Okay. And if you do ls-l on that volumes folder, valid Docker volume, you will see Nginx backup, that's the previous one. Nginx logs, that's the other one, which we created just now. Okay. Inside that, they both will have underscore data as the common. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, now how do I use this volume? So volume means it is just like a mount. Okay. So when we create, let's say, um, Docker run in the daemon mode. So name of the container, let's say I will say web, and I will just start the Nginx latest. Okay. And also, so let's say I also open port 80 on the host to 80 on the container. So this will just start the Nginx web server. Okay. But what I want to do is I want to take backup of a folder. Okay. So always remember, so whatever volumes, networks, port mapping names that we are using, it should be before the image only. After the image, only CMD should come. Okay. So when we are mapping a port, we know that it is always host and then it is container. Okay. And when you're trying to map a volume, it is also the same thing. We should use -v. Okay, I'll show you all the available flags. Okay, so on the host machine, which volume we have? Nginx backup. That's the volume that we created on the host. Okay, no need to give the path, complete path. Okay, so if you're just giving a name, it is assumed that it is already created using Docker volume create, and it is a Docker volume. It is not any other folder on the current location or anything like that. It is always a Docker volume. Got it? And then inside, I would like to mount this under user share Nginx HTML. Got it? Clear, guys? Got it? Yes, if you have any questions, just ask.
So Vikram, Docker volume inspect, like what it is exactly doing?
It is
Does it
just
mean?
giving you the details of the volume. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, so here, if I have this as my machine, okay, so I'm calling it as Docker host. Okay, so on the host machine, I'm creating various volumes. Okay, using Docker volume create. So one such volume is nginx underscore backup. Okay, so what I'm doing is when I'm trying to create a C1 container, I'll take this volume from my host machine and I'll mount it into my container at any point. Okay, let's say I pointed into /temp. Okay, got it? Then what will happen? So whatever content that is there in /temp, since it is mounted into, I mean, this volume is mounted into that path, so they get synced. Okay, understood? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Okay, so let me prove that. So this is one way.
Is it a
I will
sync or
also
is
show
it a link, Vikram? I think it is a link, right?
link. I mean, I just use that. Okay, whatever data that will be copied. Okay, so here whatever data that you have inside this folder,
Yeah.
okay, till HTML, it is mounted, like Nginx backup is mounted into that uh, particular directory. So whatever content you have, it will be available here as well. Okay, so let me just start it. Okay, no doubt Docker PS, everything is fine. Okay, but if you try to see the contents of that particular Nginx backup on your host machine, okay, you will see that there are two new files. Why there are two new files? Because whatever content that is there inside this container, okay, is now available here. Got it? So what I'll do is I'll exec into the container docker exec-it. So the name of the container that we just created is web. And then let me just go to open the bash process inside it. cd into user share nginx html. Okay. See, we have both those files, correct? In the container. Clear, guys? What I'll do is I'll simply say echo hello and then I'll say hello.txt. Where exactly I'm doing inside the container in this path, right? Now, since I have a new file inside this path, on the host machine also I should see it inside this Nginx backup volume, correct? Let's exit out of the container and again try to list all the files in this Nginx backup. See that hello.txt file is there, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so which means if I intentionally delete my previously created container, this data is still available. See, now what I can do is I can create that container again using the same volume. So which means whatever volume I have, what I'm doing is I'm mounting it into the same path,
Right.
which means now whatever data I have in the volume, it will be copied into that location so that my data is still there. Clear? That
Right.
is the use of volumes. Okay. Now, let's say Nginx also stores some logs. Okay. So where Nginx stores these logs, so we know that. And of course, you can mount multiple volumes. It is not, we can use only -v. Okay. So I'll use another -v. Okay. So we have created one more folder called Nginx logs. This time I'll mount it into var log Nginx in the container, because just a second, let me zoom out a bit. Okay, now it is clearly visible. Clearly visible, guys, the complete command. Okay, so what I did is I have another Docker volume called Nginx logs. I'm mounting into var log Nginx. Okay, so what will happen? Whatever logs that we have under var log Nginx will be copied to Nginx logs. Okay, so how do I check Nginx logs? Again, ls-l var lib docker volumes Nginx logs. See, we have, right?
So here, Vikram, we didn't create this ngx logs folder, right? We just
We
put it in.
created,
We created
yeah, using docker volume create.
logs and backup both
Here.
folder. Okay.
And one more thing, so these docker volumes, even if they are not available, okay, so let me instead of nginx logs, let me just remove one s. It's nginx log. Okay, so currently the container is there, so let me remove it and then try to recreate it. But this time I'm using nginx underscore log, which is not there. If it is not there, okay, this is specifically for named volumes, it will be automatically created. So if I do ls-l on var lib docker volumes, you will see that that folder gets auto created. Okay. This is only for named volumes. It will be automatically created. Okay. Now I can use docker volume ls like this. Okay. So I can see all these. Okay. When I try to clean up the system, right, using docker system prune. Okay. So you will see that these volumes are not included in the system prune, because these volumes will have data that belongs to the container. Even if these volumes are not mounted into any container, these volumes are not touched. Okay, got it? So that's the reason why if you look at the help section of system prune, okay, you should also include hyphen volumes in case if you want to consider pruning the volumes along with images and all other things. Okay, that is one thing. In fact, Docker volume itself has its own prune command. So if I do Docker volume prune and help, so it will show you all the options, like, do you want to remove all unused volumes? Okay, all these things. So what I'll do is I'll say just Docker volume prune. And by the way, I don't have any containers, I assume. Okay, so there is one container, probably that might be using a volume. Okay, so I'll remove this container and then I'll do Docker volume prune. I'll say hyphen all, and then it will ask you to confirm. Then you can see all the volumes got deleted. Okay, so but you should not delete the volumes like this. Okay, you should be very careful because it will have the container data. Okay, so using -v, you can just mount a volume. But if you look at the documentation, okay, so -v is there, but you also have, a new, what do you say, new way of mounting. You can either choose -v or hyphen mount. Okay, so which means, so let me just copy this. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm just taking -v to mount nginx and hyphen data. That's the named volume. Okay, so this -v for volume mount. So this is an old method. So there is a new one, but it is not used mostly because -v still supports. Okay, so here this whole thing has to be broken into multiple things. So we call it as -mount instead of -v. So this is your source directory, which is there on the host, right? So we call it as src, then equal to whatever folder, like nginx underscore data, comma, and this is the path inside the uh, what do you say, inside the container. So we call it as target. Okay. Now I think src is now changed to source, target is now called as destination, or it is called dst. You can see. So if you're going for mount, you can say mount, what is the type, whether it is a volume or a bind volume, what is the source, what is the destination, that is dst. Earlier it used to be called as something known as target. Somewhere it will be there. You can see source, destination. Here it is destination. Okay. So in order to avoid this confusion, okay, so I advise you to just use -v. Okay, that's the simplest one. Give uh the volume name on the host, and on the other side, just the path on the which one?
How do you get the paths?
Sorry,
How do you get the paths?
get the
The paths.
this one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really a good question. I should have explained this before. So if you go to Docker Hub, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You search for any image. Okay, so I am interested in, let's say, Jenkins. I'm just taking this Jenkins/Jenkins. If you open this image, so probably you'll find the documentation here, or you'll find the documentation in their own, pages. If you look clearly, so they will obviously have a run statement to create a container, and also somewhere they'll mention where this container stores its data. Okay.
Yes.
So if you see, if I just copy this, okay. So Docker run for creating a container. This is port mapping. So they are actually mapping two ports. Okay. So 8080 on the container and 8080 on the host. 50,000 on the container, 50,000 on the host. Okay. So we'll talk why two ports are necessary. So basically one for Jenkins and one for the Jenkins agents. Okay, so this is a restart policy. We already said, right? Restart can be always, restart can be on failure, correct? Or restart can be unless stopped. So restart on failure means in case if this container fails due to some issue, automatically daemon will restart this container. Now, if you look at the volume mount, they just created a Docker volume using Docker volume create Jenkins underscore home, and they mounted into var Jenkins home, because internally the container uses this particular path to store the data related to Jenkins jobs, logs, um, the plugins, user related data, everything. Okay. Similarly, if you go to Nginx page, you will see that Nginx has all the default uh, web files under user share Nginx HTML. So you need to definitely refer the documentation. Okay. So if you
Okay.
look at the other, if they have other folders for storing the logs and all, they would mention it here. But, uh, you know, so if I just run this particular container, it will fail because Jenkins needs at least, you know, 2 vCPUs and 2 GB RAM. But currently the Docker we are running is T2 micro. So this container will usually fail. Okay. So if you see in the Jenkins under var Jenkins home, you'll find a logs folder here. Okay, which means Jenkins is storing everything inside this folder. That's the reason we are just using one volume mount. Okay. In case of Nginx, Nginx stores the data here, stores the logs under var log Nginx. That's the reason why we should go for two volume mounts. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is the advantage of using Docker volumes. Okay. As I already said, you can simply use -v, give the source, colon the path, I mean the destination. Or else if you're interested in -mount syntax, okay, so you give the source as the name of the Docker volume, target as the path inside the container, and finally the name of the image as usual. Okay. So this is how Docker named volume will be, you know, used. Okay. Always remember named volumes are very specific to Docker, native to Docker. That's the reason why Docker stores them under its home directory. Okay. Sometimes, you will be required to mount a volume, so which is read only. Okay. So what is the meaning of this? So what I'll do is I'll create a Docker volume. So let's say Docker volume create. Um, let's say it can be anything, guys. Okay, I'm just taking um, my backup as the volume. Okay. So where
Yeah.
exactly this will be there? So we know that it will be under um,
Varlib Docker volume.
okay, so I'll do one thing. I'll cd into that var lib docker volumes my backup and underscore data. So this is this path. Currently, I did not mount it into any other container, so this data is empty. So I'll create a file called echo hello and then hello.txt. Okay. And this is one file. Okay. Another file I'll just create is the same thing, echo hello. I'll say this as something like index.html. Okay. I just created two files inside this volume. Okay. Got it? Now what
Yeah.
I'll do is I'll try to create a container docker run -d. Um, I can mount into Nginx or it is up to me. So I'll just open port 8080. So the name of the container is web. The volume I'm going to mount is whatever volume I just taken. Okay. Colon. So where should I mount? It is my depending upon the requirement, right? I'll say user share Nginx HTML. Okay. And then the name of the container that is Nginx latest. So while doing so, what will happen is your my backup, this volume will be mounted into this path. Okay. So currently this is read write kind of mount. Okay. The meaning is, so whatever you write inside this path will be synced to this path, right? Correct?
Right.
But I don't want the container to write anything into this volume. Okay, so I wanted to use this backup just to give the data to the container, and I don't want container to write anything into this path, so that will copy the data into this. So I want to restrict that behavior. I'm just taking a volume and mounting it, but it should be like read only mount. Okay, so here I should use an option known as colon RO, that is read only. Okay, and then I'll start a container docker ps. Okay, so the container is running. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll exec into the container. Okay, so the name of the container is web. If you see here, we have used web as the name. And then let me go to this path inside the container. Okay, so can you see the difference inside the container file system? Right? What happened here? Earlier in Nginx, if you just create a container, you will see index.html, and there is another file called 50x.html. Okay. But when we take our own backup and mount it, so the data inside this container gets replaced with this whatever data that we have. Okay. So that is an obvious thing, right? That is expected. Okay. Got it, guys? Now we also know that whatever files that we have it here will also be synced or copied to my backup. Correct?
Yeah.
So what will happen if I just try to create a file uh, in that path now? Okay, I'm sorry, guys. So we are not in that path, right? So first we need to move to that path inside the container. Okay. Now let me just repeat the same thing. So why I'm not able to create any file?
Read only file system.
Okay, because we mounted this path as read only. So which means whatever you write, basically it will be synced to my backup. But since I mounted my backup as read only, you cannot write anything back to the backup. Okay, it is an existing backup you are mounting. You are not interested in, just take the backup from the container to the host again. Okay, clear? So why this is required? Why should I need this? If I can't take any data into this volume, what is the need of using this volume or mounting it as read only? So usually we use this to mount the configurations, which the container should not change. Okay, clear? Clear, guys?
Clear.
Okay, so let
Maybe
me
I'm
prove.
thinking a bit ahead. So can we have the permissions based on the containers instead of this file system permissions?
No, we don't have anything.
So container Nginx has to have read only, but container Ubuntu has to have read
Now
write
the volume
option.
itself is read only. Okay, so no one will be able to write the data into it.
The
Like if
global
we
is the global permission, not specific to a container.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
like
Okay.
if we mount the same location user share ngx to like another folder on host, so it will not do anything.
This
So
one?
yeah, this path with another volume,
Yeah, that
like
will be done. So let's say if I use another -v and
mhm.
mount the same, okay. So there it will impact. But again, we should see whether we'll be able to mount two different volumes into the same path. Probably it is not possible. You can just give it a try. Okay. So here, why?
Even I can make my backup also read only, right, at the host level.
Yeah, you can use.
Okay.
But again, yeah, you can use it. Okay. So here inside the my backup, I have this index.html, right? Okay. So which is nothing but a simple hello. Okay. And it has, if you see when we mounted it, it also changed the default index.html page in the container. Okay. So which means if I try to access this particular container on port 80, if it is still open. Okay, I think this is not open in the security groups. So let me open 80. You can see it has changed it. Okay. So this is one thing. So let me exit out of the container. Do delete the container. Okay. So this is about, Docker named volume. Okay. So here, whenever we use Docker volume create, volume gets created in varlib Docker folder. Okay. So what if I already have a folder? Okay. So for example, uh, So I'll just go to my home EC2 user somewhere. Okay, so create a folder known as my nginx conf. Okay, so this is just a folder uh, called my nginx conf. If you see, I have this in home EC2 user my nginx conf, right? So this is not Docker volume because it is not there in varlib Docker, and also it is not created using Docker volume create command. Correct? Right, guys? Guys, got it?
Vikram, please repeat this.
Okay, I have a folder. It is just a folder. Home EC2 my nginx conf. Okay.
Okay.
Now I want to use this as a volume for my Docker. Okay. So the meaning is, so instead of using -v and mentioning, Docker volume, name of the Docker volume. So let's say I have a volume in temp. Okay. My own volume. It's just a folder. Can I use that folder? Yes, you can use. So these are known as bind volumes, where you're not actually relying on Docker to create volumes. You already have a folder somewhere on the host machine, and then you wanted to use it. Okay, so for example, so this is the folder I have. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll mount this folder, okay, into a particular path inside the container. Okay, now I'm saying this as a bind mount because I'm binding an existing directory or a particular path. Okay. But how do you differentiate between the bind and the named? So why can't this be a named volume? Hmm? So let's say I removed this. Now tell me whether my nginx conf is a Docker volume or it's a bind volume. Let's assume this path is
It's
already
get
existing.
Docker volume.
Yeah. Even though if you run this command, let's say I'll just go one step back. So currently I'm in this path. Just a second, guys. So currently I'm in this path, home EC2 user, where I have my nginx conf as the folder, a simple folder. Now I'm using that folder as a volume. So what is this my nginx conf now? Is it this folder or is it a folder created by Docker in varlib Docker?
inspect user
It
Docker
is a
inspect.
Docker volume.
Docker volume. Yeah.
It won't consider your local volume. But how do I use my local volume? I have this path, but if I'm not able to give this path, then what is the use? Okay, so you need to give a small change. You need to mention your folder in a different way. You can simply say dot slash to indicate that it is a path on the machine in the current directory, or else simply you can do dollar $pwd, that is present working directory slash my nginx config. Okay, or else you can just start with the complete path like this. Okay, so if you have something in this format, like a complete path, or you are saying in the current directory like this, or something like in the present working directory, a folder like this, then this is considered to be a bind volume. Okay, clear now?
Yes.
Okay, so which means if I just run a container, okay, so Docker run -d -p 80, that is nginx. I'll use volume. I'll simply say my nginx conf. So here I'm just going to mount it into etc nginx, guys. Okay, I'm mounting into a different folder now. Okay, and the name of the image is nginx latest. So this time, which volume it is using my nginx conf means? If you
Docker.
see, it is using Docker volume. It has created a Docker volume. Okay, and if you list the contents of the Docker volume, that is varlib Docker volumes my nginx conf underscore data, you will see that all your, basically the contents under etc nginx is now copied here. Okay, this is fine, this is expected. So let me remove this particular container again. Okay, so what is the name of the container? So we did not mention the name when we created. Let me take the container ID, and also let me do docker volume prune. Okay, so just docker volume prune. Now this time what I'll do is, anyways, I have a folder in my current path, right? My nginx conf. So I'll try to mount it. Okay, so for this, I'll just use // which indicates current path. Okay, a volume on the current path. Okay, now if you look at the contents of that my nginx conf in your current path, okay, so it is not, or the files are not synced. Just give me a second. Probably mounted it in a different way. So let me use $pwt, a folder. It is not running. So Docker logs also you won't get it. Yeah, so it says etc nginx.conf. Okay, so this one is not there in the volume that you're mounting. Yeah, so actually in the volume that whatever you're mounting, so nginx.conf is missing. Okay, so that's the reason why it is actually not taking. Okay, so the data is not available, right? That's the reason why your nginx container is failing. Okay, you can see the contents of this, we don't have anything. Okay, and nginx.conf is the minimum requirement. Okay, so we can't just use this for nginx. So let me just use for a different container. So let me remove that particular container. Okay, so I'll mount this. Still, I'll mount this into the nginx, but I'll mount it into other path. Let's say /temp. Okay, so nginx is not blocked. So nginx started. Now whatever data that you write to /temp, it will be returned to this particular folder. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply do docker exec -it. So the name of the container is this. Okay, I'll simply say bash -c. Okay, I don't want to open bash and then write the content. So I'm writing the content into /temp. Okay, I'll create a file known as hello.txt. Okay, so no such file or okay, sorry, not cat, it's echo, right? Okay, I just wrote a file into the container file system under /temp. Okay, So that slash temp is mounted into this nginx folder on the local host, right? ls-l. See here, it is there. Got it? Okay. So bind volumes are used when you already have, a particular folder with some content, and if you want to mount that content directly into a container. Got it? Clear, guys? Is any questions? Any questions, guys? Okay, so when we are talking about Nginx container, so we say that Nginx by default runs on port 80, right? How do I change it to, how do I make the container run on a different port? Let's say I want to run container on 9090. If I simply change this -p, will it work?
No,
It won't work because you need to change in the configuration. So for
the
this, what
image.
I'll not image, it's a configuration change. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use Docker volumes. Okay. So let's say Nginx is storing everything in etc Nginx folder. I'm using Docker named volume, okay, to take the complete data. Okay, so here this port is already occupied. So let me just see what all containers I have. Docker rm-f and the name of the volume. Okay, and let me create another container, and also let's name it so that it is easier for me to delete it. Okay, so I just taken the entire etc nginx content into this folder. So this is Docker volume. So ls-l. Um, okay, so you can see here the entire etc nginx content is now available here. Okay, I just took the backup. Okay, so once I have the backup, okay, so my requirement is I want some Nginx data. Okay, the configuration of Nginx data. I just took the backup and I simply removed it. Okay, because I'm not interested in this container. I'm interested in the configurations. Okay, if you see, my data is still there. Got it? I'll cd into that folder where I have the data. And if you see inside that, we have nginx.conf file, right? So this is the configuration that Nginx usually loads. Okay, and if you look at this configuration, it is saying this configuration can also come from another folder called conf.d and all the .conf files from that directory. Okay, so let me go to uh, that directory. Inside that, let me see what all files are. I have one default.conf. So I'll edit this file. Okay, now if you see, your Nginx is by default listening on port 80 on both IPv4 and IPv6. So I'll change it to 90 here. Okay, got it?
Okay.
Right. And so it is looking for default index.html file in this root. Okay, that's fine. Let's not change. Okay, so I changed it. Now I have the configuration, so which is available in this Nginx conf. Okay, so I'll just take this volume and mount it into Nginx again. So this time, since I have a different configuration and I'm mounting that configuration into etc Nginx, so this Nginx latest use that that config file. But if I run this container, basically it will run. Okay, so can I access it now? Why it is not accessible? Because on the host side it is 80, but on the container side you did a configuration change to 90 port, right? Which means
Right.
from the host machine, your traffic should be redirected to 90 port on the container. Okay, so let me remove the existing container now and then use a different port map, which is now 90. Okay, just don't think that changing -p to 90 it will actually change the container port. It won't. You should actually change its configuration. Okay, now if you see, it is working. Clear?
So like while using -v, we are overriding the port, right?
No,
Like we
we are
are,
not overriding the port. We have a configuration and we are overriding the default configuration from the image.
yeah, automatically it is copying that configuration
Yeah,
from our
because
Docker host to container.
because it is -v, it is a mount, it will copy. Yes.
Okay. Say if I use RO like read only,
Yeah, so that is the
then
best
also
practice actually. So because it is a configuration, a container
right.
should not change it. You should actually mount it as read only.
Okay. So we are changing the port which is from the basic image, original image, right? We
Yeah,
just
because
override
I
that
don't
port.
know, the exact configurations available in etc nginx in the container. So first I mounted it as usual, took the complete configuration here, and then I modified it here. And I mounted it back again so that the changed configurations will be overwritten here in the container.
Okay.
Got it?
Right. So on both the sides, on both the volumes, the information should be similar, right? Automatically. It
Yeah,
will do.
correct. Correct. It will do.
So in real time also we have to first run the container and then grab those
Yeah,
config
because
files.
I don't have the config, right? I don't have any data with me.
Right, right.
Okay. So this is a folder to folder mapping. Okay. So what if I just need a single file to be mounted? Let's say, let me just undo a few things. Okay. So let's say, so here I'll have everything, right? On the container side, I have index.html, 50.html. I just wanted to mount a single file, not the entire folder. Okay. So here, this is a Docker, volume. Okay. So inside this, let's say I have index.html file. Okay. I want to mount this file. Okay. You can't just mount a file into just like a folder, right? You have to mount a file just like a file. Okay. So here I'm mounting index.html as index.html like this. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is file to file. So I can also mount files. I can mount volumes. It depends upon the requirement. Okay. So that is the concept of Docker volumes. Okay. So when you have named volumes and bind volumes, which one is preferred? Okay. So named volumes are always preferred because the entire life cycle of named volumes is managed by Docker. Okay, you can use Docker volume, create, ls, prune, rm, okay, to manage the complete life cycle of those volumes using Docker CLI commands. Okay, and these are independent of the operating system. If you do Docker volume create in Windows, Mac, and Linux, your volume will be created. Okay, but when we take about the bind mount, okay, so in Windows, the way we give the path will be different, right? Okay, so it is $pwd in Linux. In case of
Mm.
Windows, you should give a different path. I mean, the path will be completely different, right? You can't just use Linux-based commands. Correct.
Right.
So it becomes extremely difficult. Anyways, most of the VMs that we use are Linux only. It is still fine. But, volumes created through Docker commands are better. And, they work equally on all three operating systems. I mean, the volume will be created equally. I can do Docker volume create in Windows, it will still create it. Okay. And also these volumes are easier to backup or migrate than bind volumes. And also you can access these volumes using Docker APIs as we already seen. I mean, we did not see, but using Docker APIs, we can query for the volumes, create a volume, delete a volume, all we can do with the APIs. But do we have any API to create a volume on a Linux host? No, right? You just have to SSH and run mkdir commands, correct? Okay. Now the final topic is sharing volume. So can a volume be shared across multiple containers? Yes, it is possible. Okay. So let's say you have Jenkins master slave setup. Okay. So master is already using a volume to store its data. Okay. So just like if I just take this as Jenkins. Okay. So Jenkins, what it is doing, it is storing var Jenkins home contents in Jenkins home Docker volume. Okay. Which means a volume is already created. Now I want to create another slave Jenkins. Okay. But that slave Jenkins needs the data from this. Okay. So I'm just calling it as, so let's say name as J1, Jenkins 1. I want to create Jenkins 2 just like Jenkins 1. And I also mount the same volume. Okay. Got it. See, same volume is mounted. Correct.
Right.
Okay, so here what is advantage is, whatever data that one Jenkins writes, so the other Jenkins also has access to it. Okay. And the other thing here is, so let's say you have a Jenkins J1 container. Okay, I need to start Jenkins J2 container, but I don't know what all volumes that Jenkins J1 is using. Okay, Jenkins might be using some 3 to 4 volume mounts. Okay, I also need all those volumes in J2, but I don't know, what all volumes it is mounting. So in this case, what you will do is you will simply use something known as hyphen volumes from. I'll say volumes from J1. Okay. If I say volumes from J1, what Docker will do is whatever volumes that this Jenkins J1 is using, so the same volumes will be mounted for J2 as well. Like it is just that I'm saying take the volumes from J1. That's it. Okay. So for example, so let me run this simple, what do you say? Shall I create Nginx? That is also fine. Or else let me take this simple example and close. Okay, so I'm just creating a container C1. Okay. So I'm using a volume map called my volume and I'm just mounting into /temp of U12 container. I mean this C1 container. So what I did is I just created a file under /temp. Okay, under /temp, I created test.log. So that test.log file will be there in my volume, right? Because it is volume mounted. So now when I'm trying to create C2 container, so what I'm asking it to do is just take the volumes from C1. Okay. Now since in C1 a volume called my volume is mounted in temp, in C2 also a volume called my volume will be mounted in temp. So which means in C2 if you go to temp and see you will find this log file because this log file is there in the previous volume.